Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Drive SOC Efficiency with Network Data and ML. At the end of today's webinar, we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions tab. And now I'd like to introduce our first presenter, James Schweitzer.
Hi, thank you very much, Ed. It's my pleasure to talk to everyone today. Today, as we talk about SOC efficiency, we're actually going to be partnering with Elastic, and I want to take a moment and introduce our presenters. Matteo is a security specialist at Elastic. He's going to spend time talking a lot about ML and the capabilities of Elastic security. Richard Harlan is an SE in the Tola region for Corelight. He's going to spend some time talking about the specific Corelight integrations with Elastic. And myself, I'm James. I lead the SEs for the East and Federal within Corelight. So let's get right on down to the information for everybody. I'll quickly go over the agenda. Really, what we want to talk about is a data problem. And we'll summarize this. Everyone is very well aware of some of the challenges you have with data. What Corelight does is a solution that is different on how to address that problem. From there, we'll introduce Elastic Security. And Elastic Security is the new solution for the SAM that can combine that with endpoint security for their use case. And we have a few examples we're going to talk about leveraging Corelight data with Elastic Security and some automated detections. And then we'll have time for Q&A if anyone has Q&A afterwards. But before we get started with that, I think it's important to mention that next week, we have a virtual Zeek week. You can go down and visit zeek.org. With this, the first day is training. Day 2 is threat hunting is going to take place. And day 3 is a chance for really dev discussions and roadmap discussions that are going to take place. But it's really a great time. Be sure to register. It's going to be very informative to talk about the discussions of what's the state of the possible with open source Zeek. Similarly, unfortunately, overlapping is Elasticon, but it's also going to be recorded. You can go down and you see at the bottom of the slide is their registration. So go ahead and register. Elasticon actually has Trevor Noah and Megan Rapinoe are going to be some of the guest speakers. It looks like it's going to be an action-packed agenda with customer stories as well as some one-on-one opportunities for networking. And with that, now let's get right into the data problem. Networks can generate hundreds of thousands to millions of packets daily. And there can be a whole lot of value with that information, but there also can be information that is really a lot less value. Think maybe DNS pointer records, for example. And really it's what I'm trying to get with this graphic. Which would you rather swim in, drink from, Crater Lake or the Pacific trash dump with a lot of, garbage? Or, this could also be, if you wanted to say, if you're not familiar, Lake Karachi. It's in the Ukraine, and it's the most polluted open air place on Earth. Think about it from a radiological point of view. What Corelight wants to do is we want to provide you the best data to ingest into Elastic Security for your team to conduct an investigation. We also want to help you. We're going to talk about several tools that we have to allow you to ensure that it is the best data and it's only the content that you need in order to conduct the investigation. But by doing that, I think it's really important to recognize that Corelight is really more than a data format. There's an open source community that has been really evolving and working with this data for over 20 years. Having this 20-year evolution with developers and incident responders working together, they have made the data better. They've really kind of altered over time the structure of the data because it's not just, let's face it, logs are created because someone is troubleshooting something. They don't really think about its operational use. Throughout the 20-year history of Zeek and Corelight, what you have is these logs have evolved to support operations. They support people who want to conduct investigations. And part of that is really extensibility. And it's the logs, you can add new fields. If there's a value in the packet that you want to add to the log, you have the capability that you can extend the Corelight data to include that. If there's a new protocol that you want to parse, you can either use the current bin pack or really what's coming, and it's an alpha release, is the spicy protocol. You can do that so that you have the opportunity as an end user or an enterprise to really be on the leading edge. you're not dependent upon a corporation to drive what content you have within your SIEM to conduct investigations. From that, we really think that the Corelight, it's a platform. So in addition to the logs, it's really writing applications or scripts or packages, things that consume events. You can do this so that you can share with others within your enterprise or within the broader community of either Corelight customers or in the open source. There are several examples of this that have been written to as packages to fingerprint a TLS connection. So then you can do data stacking to see what you recognize, to actually look for the eternal suite of exploits that were released to detect that. Really, and I think it's important for people to recognize all of the capabilities that Corelight has as a platform and why it's not really a format. And I think a great analogy there's on a Corelight blog is you could talk about the Taj Mahal as a building with 120 rooms, but would it really do justice to talk about the Taj Mahal like that? And I think that's a great analogy to think about what Corelight can do. It's more than just a log. It's more than just a format. It's really supporting your security operations and your broader security ecosystem, with data. But now we've talked a lot about that. Let's get in and talk about the Corelight solution itself. Corelight solutions span, if you think traditional physical hardware that you would see in a data center that you see on the right side, they're all 1 RU sizes. But it's really as we move to the left when we start talking about either our software sensor, which is for container or a native OS deployment, our virtual sensor or cloud sensors. So you see for the cloud, AWS and Azure for our cloud sensor, our software sensor actually is able to deploy on GCP. What Corelight does with our solutions is we provide you the same platform to deploy no matter it's a physical deployment, a virtual deployment, or a cloud-based deployment. All of these Corelight solutions can be managed from our Fleet Manager. And as we went through the development of the Fleet Manager, we decided to make it a virtual machine so that it would be easy to deploy within your enterprise, and you could deploy that in the cloud, if you choose. But now that we know what Corelight offers to kind of get the data, how do we work with other SOC solutions? Corelight fits firmly in the newly defined network detection and response category from Gartner. And with this, we think what we're doing is, for the long time, throughout the history of open source Zeek and Corelight, we provided rich curated metadata. What's happening on the wire? We're curating and providing you that information that you can use to respond to an event on your network. As a result of that, you can identify anomalous behaviors, suspicious activities that are taking place. Just recently, Corelight integrated Suricata into our solutions. And I think it's important to mention that it's an integration, and we're the first to do this. Many folks in the open source, as well as some commercial companies, have installed the two that run side by side. What Corelight has done is they've combined the contents of the Corelight, the con log, with the Suricata Eve log. By putting both of pieces of information into one, they're making it easier for folks who are analyzing the data to quickly assess if an event was a true positive or a false positive. Was that event an incident? Corelight solutions also can perform file extraction, so we can carve off files so that you can use that within your existing data pipeline, whether you use Cuckoo, Silence, depending on what solution you have to perform a dynamic malware analysis. Corelight can extract those files to extend into your existing pipeline. And lastly, oftentimes people want to fall back on PCAP. Corelight created 2 years ago something that's called Community ID. Community ID, think of it as it's a foreign key to pivot from one data type to another. And so there's been broad adoption, for example, with Community ID for Moloch in the open source, as well as most recently Wireshark has announced its support. So to provide you the opportunity where you can pivot from Corelight data using the Community ID to another data source, another form of analysis. So Corelight is here to complement your existing SOC solutions. But I've done a lot of time talking about Corelight and open source Zeek. What's the difference? Why should I be interested in Corelight when I just have something that I can use with the open source? We'll start off with